All right, we're good. So, as you know, my name is Jacob Falkenberg. I am the Communications and Member Services Director at Venture Portland. With me today is Joy Church, Venture Portland's Executive Director, and Jeff Lynott, who is a organizer that works in the Foster and Lentz business districts. Thanks for being here. We're going to be discussing the annual checkup. But first, let me go over just a couple of the ground rules for our webinars. If you could just go ahead and mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to avoid any background noise or interruptions. Feel free to pop questions into the chat over there. We're going to leave some time at the end to answer any questions you have. There's a lot of stuff here, as I'm sure you noticed when you were looking over the annual checkup checklist that I sent out. So we're happy to clarify anything that you saw in there. Also, feel free to collaborate with each other, but please don't interrupt. Be respectful, and make sure you listen when people are speaking as well. As I said, we are going to be recording today's session, so it'll be available on our YouTube channel shortly after, and I'll send a follow-up email with some more resources around some of the topics we're going to be discussing. So with that, let's go ahead and do some introductions. So if you want to go ahead and just say your name, your business district, and then just something that that was concerning to you when you attempted to fill out the annual checkup document. So what's something that you didn't realize at first, but then were maybe a little concerned about, something that you need to do for your district in the next year? This is a new year, and a lot of you are new in your roles. So what's the most concerning thing you have around governance in your district? So we'll start with Lizzie. Hey, Lizzie.
Oh, hey, me. Hi, I'm Lizzie Caston. I'm the interim executive director for Alberta Main Street. And we're not a business district, but we fit into the business district model in some ways. So I guess the biggest one for me is I have inherited this job. And like many places, we're 10 years old. We have different electronic records in different places. So finding the information was new for me. And I'm still wondering if it's there and I'm missing it, or if we've never done some of it. I do want to say we've done a lot of things really well around governance. So I'm extremely proud of this organization and leadership, but there's just some gaps, and I don't know if we have them, or even if we do have them, if they're on track, if they meet legal guidelines, things like that. So I'm curious to see not just if we have them, but what shape they are in.
Yeah, definitely. For someone who's new in a role, tracking down some of that stuff, especially stuff that is years and years old, can be a daunting task if there's no organizational.
No, it's good. It's what there is. It's just you do things like you switch from Dropbox to Google, right? And some things might not have gotten permissions to come over, or some things are still paper records, or, I just want to say Alberta's done a really good job on a lot of things, because I was able to find things really easily. But my lesson learned is, gee, that admin side is so important for orgs. And it's a natural as we switch into electronic records, but we've done a lot of things really, really well. I'm really pleased with what I found, but there are gaps in both finding it and then just wondering, like I said, if it actually is on the up and up or level or needs to be updated. I don't know that part.
Well, you're not alone there, but glad to hear that, a lot of that stuff is readily available. Okay, let's move on to Elise now. Hi, Elise. Oh, I think you're muted there.
There, sorry. Hi, Lizzie pretty much said it all. I'm the acting board president, and I too went through the checklist, and I think that we've got a lot of it together, but there's stuff that is very questionable in terms of its current legality, and because our organization has changed a little bit, and whether we need to update things. So that I was surprised about how many things we do have together. So.
Awesome, thank you. Up next is Cody G. What's up, Cody?
Hello. Yeah, the one thing that I've encountered and don't really have a great solution for, I'd be kind of curious to hear about how other people approach it, is with the boards, there is turnover in terms of board members, whether it's, yearly, every couple years, every, 3 years. And a lot of the accounts get tied to a specific person. It seems to be a requirement, whether it's a PayPal or whatever type of account, and then that process of transitioning that to the new people. It seems like it's one of those things that it kind of is what it is, and it's a headache, and you just kind of have to muddle through it. But if anybody has found a more seamless, easy way to do it, would definitely love to hear your experience.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely something that comes up a lot with all the different accounts, not just the bank account, but all
Gmail,
online accounts.
social.
Yeah, we've definitely heard horror stories from districts that had just one person kind of in charge of those, and they all went away. So starting from scratch. So definitely something you want to have in place now to save yourself the headache later. Okay, moving on to Kathy. Hi, Kathy.
Hey everyone, I think I would echo everything that's already been said. I find the same problems with those two things, the records, finding old paperwork from other organizers. And also what Cody just said about one person said something common. Jacob, you know this because I kept trying to get into a newsletter that was tied to Dane, and you had to go into his email to get me a code. And I finally changed the email address, figured that one out. But these are problems for sure. Oh, and sorry, I didn't say this, but I'm Kathy Medor. I'm the organizer for St. John's and for Beaumont. So sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but I totally agree with those points that are already made. I would agree.
Awesome. Yeah, it's lucky that I had access to those email accounts, because with volunteers, that's not always a possibility. So definitely something to be aware of moving forward in the future. Okay, up next is Peter. Hello, Peter. Peter. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Sorry. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here today. My name is Peter Tolan Baker. I'm the board president for the Multnomah Village Business Association. I joined the board and also became an officer kind of all at once last October, and have been using the last few months. I'm really catching up on where the organization has been and where we're going. We have some good things happening at this point. In terms of records and checklists, I'm sort of learning as I go, so to speak, in this initial first few months, but I was left with an extremely well-organized set of records through the outgoing president, Aaron, which was extremely helpful for me. Specifically on this meeting, I'm not sure what checklist you're referring to. That's my only mea culpa. So if that was something that I missed on the information for this event, I apologize. But if there is one, I'd be happy to get it.
No worries. We will send that out with some of the other resources afterwards, so you can try and work through that with the rest of the board. But thanks for being here, and I'm glad to hear that the previous president was able to kind of keep things in order for you. Okay, moving on now to Nancy. Hi, Nancy.
Good morning. Nancy Chapin, president of the 82nd Avenue Business Association. We've added an of roses, but that's not official, but it's official on the street. So so we use that, 82nd Avenue of Roses Business Association. And let's see. Actually, we were very fortunate because Jeff was working with us for 3 years, and he left me amazing list of how to get to everything, and there were lots more everythings than I even realized. So, so I feel very, very fortunate that we have, you know, had that care taken of us those years. I don't know, I had kind of gone through it before, so there weren't any surprises, particularly other than just there's so much to think about. But sometimes when you've done it for so long, you don't really think about thinking about it. Does that make sense? You just got to do it. So anyway, that's my story.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, and I'm glad that Jeff was able to kind of aid in that transition. That's always something that's difficult, but I'm glad that he provided that to you.
Yeah.
Okay, up next is Liz Smith. Hey, Liz.
Hey, everybody, good to see you. So I'm Liz Smith. I'm president of the St. John's Boosters Business Association. I have to take out one of my headphones and I can't hear. I can't hear myself. And I took over in January, so all very new. The checklist was really interesting to me because we've experienced tremendous growth in the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 years. We went from 5 members to now 100. So used to be like, oh, you know, if you want to be on the board, let's look around the table. You're all on the board, you know. So now we've gone to like a nominations committee and all that kind of stuff. And it's the same thing now with members. So the question that like really stuck out for me is, do you use your membership vote on new members? And I was like, no. If you want to be a member, you just send us the money and you're a member. But that brings to mind, we have a large industrial area, and say we have a huge Amazon warehouse over there that employs a lot of people. So say, you know, with our current criteria, you want to be a member, you're a member. And if you give us like X amount of donations, you get your logo on everything. And is that what we want? Is that maybe a conflict with some of our small businesses? I don't know. What's ethical? What should we be doing? So that started that like spinning train of thought for me from that one question on the checklist.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You've definitely experienced some great growth over the past couple of years, and with that comes new challenges and just things you hadn't really had to think about in the past. So hopefully we can talk about some of that stuff today. All right, up next is Eleni. Hi, Eleni.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eleni with Stadium District, and the checklist is really helpful, and it kind of also helped me measure some growth. So when I did this last time, I realized our bylaws, we were not compliant practicing with our bylaws, so we updated that and kind of made the plan to do policies, but we haven't really got into policies. So policies is one thing I'm really interested in. The other thing is to the fact if we don't have a good checks and balances for who's doing it. So recently had to like refile some things that expired because they just went to the president. Am I breaking up?
Just a little bit, yeah. But you're coming through now.
Okay, sorry. So maybe it's fines, and that we know that somebody's checking that, because if it just goes to one person and they don't get the mail or they miss the notice, so that's an important thing for us. And we need a board secretary. So
that's
expanding,
important.
kind of expanding. Yeah, we need to, everyone just kind of passes it off and nobody will commit. So expanding our membership to have more of a pool to pull from.
Great, all great things that are definitely important to focus on in the coming year. So I'm glad that was useful to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about bylaws and why that's important a little bit later. So thanks for bringing that to our attention as well. Up next is Deborah. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Rochford, and I work for Venture Portland as an organizer, and right now with the Williams Vancouver Business Association. I would just echo what everybody else said. I started working with the Williams district in January. And one of the first things as an organizer I do is go dig for all these papers, go look for the bylaws, go look for all the passwords, go look for all these things. And, you know, I'm still hunting for some of them because it's the classic thing, like, you know, some is electronic in this place and some is printed out in this place, and who knows who has the password for that. And so really one of the things that I try to do for organizations is really try to get some of that collected together, so that not only is it somewhere digitally, but that they have a paper copy that they can reference during board meetings when we could meet in person. And so, you know, I think that's important to make sure that you do have a paper copy, because then if somebody can't get into something, you can still see it, and also reference it when you are at meetings together. You know, it's a little bit easier to reference digital things right now because we are all on digital platforms. But when we're meeting face to face and when we go back to that, sometimes it's easier if a question comes up to grab a notebook that has all of your paperwork in it to look up that bylaw real quick when the question comes up, you know, versus somebody having to go dig for the digital file kind of thing. So, yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Once the pandemic is over, or pre-pandemic, Venture Portland used to give the board, each board member, a board binder, which was just filled with paper copies of all that stuff, bylaws, policies, anything you could possibly want to know. So I think getting back into that practice, you know, once we're able to, is always a good idea. Okay, up next is Roger. Hey, Roger.
Hey, I was just kind of listening today because I thought Bill was going to be in representing Hawthorne Boulevard, but I will. I understand now that he's at the vet and he probably won't be joining us. So if he is, it'll be late. And in answer to your question, yes, Hawthorne is well organized and it's very old. And I'm sure there are things that we can do better, but we seem to do most of the things we're supposed to do pretty well. One of the things that I found in the annual checkup was on page 6, and that was when I was kind of thinking about electronic, no, not, oh, I'm sorry, page 5. It had to do with our 501c designations, various designations of business districts versus organizing districts specifically, such as Venture Portland. But I was trying to find some of those pieces, and the link at the end of federal, Jacob, talks about www.irs.gov/charities. That's a dead link. I'm not sure why it's a dead link at the IRS site, but that didn't take me very far. I thought you should know. Anyway, I'll just listen to what's going on with other districts and try and be helpful as I can. Thank you.
Great, thanks for being here. And yeah, we'll send Bill the link so he can check it out later. And thanks for letting me know about that broken link. The annual checkup is an old document, so yeah, some of that stuff probably does need to be updated. Okay, up next is Daphne. Daphne, if you're just joining us, we're just saying our name, our business district, and just what we're most concerned about when it comes to the governance of a business association, or what we're just wondering about, would like more information on.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, my name is Daphne. I am part of the Boosters in St. John's board, and I'm also going to be joining the WBBA board. So honestly, I'm still kind of new to like this board world. So I kind of looked over the checklist, but a lot of these phrases and words, they're still kind of new for me. So I just want to be here to also like to just represent Williams and St. John's and see what you guys are doing, what I can learn, and then hopefully bring back to those districts and just be more of an intentional board member. So I'm kind of just here to listen.
Sounds good. Yeah, you're in the right place. We're going to go through some of the important stuff that's in that checklist and hopefully clarify a few things. So, when you do meet up with the board again, you can kind of help out with the whole process. And then finally, we've got Neil. Welcome, Neil.
Hello, my name is Neil Matson, and I'm serving as interim president of the Montevilla East Tabor Business Association. And I'm sorry for being late, and I'm scrambling around trying to find the checklist, which is really great resource, several pages of really good information that I need to find. If there's a way to get a link to that, because I can't find it in my email. But anyways, I might have missed the introduction. Is there you want a sort of status of where we're at, sort of governance-wise?
Yeah, just anything that you're concerned about or that you would like more information around, just from the short time that you've been in your role.
Yeah, I think I'll just say one of our challenges that I've identified is kind of institutional knowledge and what happens when changeover on the board happens and getting everybody up to speed with their roles and responsibilities. I would say that right now we're in a kind of a beginning of a new crop of board members phase and learning how to make sure we're doing all the things correctly. And that resource, that checklist is really great for getting everybody started.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the idea, and it's hard for one person to fill it out. So I'll send you over a copy, and you can kind of look it over with the rest of the board once you've kind of gotten a little bit more information here today. So thanks for being here. Okay, well, with that, we're going to go just dive right into this checklist. Now, I know some of you had a chance to look at it, some of you haven't, but essentially it's a 4-page document with around 100 different things that you need to be thinking about on an annual basis when it comes to keeping your association healthy and in good standing with the state and with the federal government. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing today, but I am going to highlight some things that you should be aware of as you kind of work through the process with your board and identify, what you need to focus on in the coming year. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's see here. Okay. Does everyone see my screen now? Okay, cool. Let's put this in full screen. Okay, great. So, things to think about when you're thinking about your organizational documents and filings. So this is the first part of the checkup, and this is really just the bare bones basic stuff of what you need to have to be a business association according to the state of Oregon and to the federal government. So the very first thing that you will file as an organization is your articles of incorporation. So that's something that you only file once, but you can file amendments to this document if your name changes or your mission changes or you get your 501c6 or your 501c3 or your fiscal year changes. This is just the very basic information about your organization that you file with the state. So you want to make sure that if any of those things changed, whether it's name, fiscal year, you want to make sure to file an amendment with the state to make sure that is up to date, because this is just the basic founding document of your organization, so it needs to reflect accurately. So review this, make sure that this is up to date. And then once your articles are good, you want to look at your bylaws. So this is a much more complex document, but it's basically all the different ways that your organization runs. So this will determine who can be a member of the organization. How do you elect your directors and your board, and how long do they serve for? What are the terms of serving on the board? What does an election look like? What does voting look like? What does quorum look like? how many board members do you need to have? All the different things that kind of determine the way you can operate are determined in your bylaws. So it's super important that you review these bylaws on an annual basis with the board and make any adjustments as needed, especially in COVID times, as that's kind of changed the way that we kind of operate as an organization. So Joy is going to go into more detail on some bylaws best practices a little bit later, but bylaws are crucial and something you need to review on an annual basis. You also want to make sure that you're doing your annual filings. So this is your filing with the state. That's your annual report, and that's due on the anniversary of the date you initially filed to become an organization. So when you filed your articles of incorporation. And usually this is just a really quick and dirty questionnaire that basically just asks for you to confirm a lot of the contact information for your association. So who's the current president, who's the current secretary, what's the address, and then you send in $50. So super quick and dirty, but super important that you do this on an annual basis because if you don't, the state will dissolve your organization, and then it's a whole lot more work and money to get your organization reinstated. So something to be aware of, you can check your status on the Secretary of State's website just by plugging in your association name, and it'll tell you when your annual report is due, and you can do that online. And then for the IRS, you need to file a 990. So this is due on the 15th day of the 5th month after your fiscal year ends. So if you're on a calendar year fiscal year where you end, December 31st, this 990 is due by the 15th of May, as an example. And really, for organizations under $50,000, you can file the postcard for the 990, which is a lot like the annual report. It's just a quick questionnaire about who is running the organization and just confirming that you made less than $50,000 that year. So that's super easy to do. Once you get above 50,000, you'll probably be filing the 990EZ, which is a little bit more complicated. You can still do this yourself, but it's best to work with your treasurer and whoever is running the books of the organization to do so. And then once you hit that $200,000 threshold, that's when the regular 990 is due, which is even more information. But super important to make sure that someone is being tasked with completing these on time each year. The annual filings are also something that should be kept in your document retention policy. So we're going to talk a little bit about policies next, but these are things that should be held in perpetuity based on the document retention policy that your organization has. So you should always be keeping your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, and your annual filings permanently in your a corporate document retention system, whether it's a Google Drive or if you have hard copies of those documents somewhere. Things to keep in mind for your board of directors. So this is the next bucket down when we're talking about things we're just thinking about on an annual basis. First of all, when you're having board meetings, you should be having agendas. So if you're not doing agendas, they're super useful for keeping your meetings on track and making sure you're actually taking care of the business that's required by setting time and speakers for each topic. You most definitely need to be doing minutes. So this is a requirement. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. This is the legal record of your organization's action. So each board meeting, your secretary should be taking minutes, the who, what, when, where, why of everything that's discussed, who makes a motion, who makes a second, if anybody abstains from a motion. These are the legal records. So you don't want to make them too specific, but you don't want to leave out any important things that were discussed. So you can go back and reference those later. And then once those are, a draft of those is completed, they will be approved at the following board meeting. So I hope you're doing this, but if not, definitely a practice that you need to begin. Next up are policies. So these are ways to protect your organization and to kind of set expectations for board members. And this is everything from your conflict of interest policy, your anti-harassment policy, code of conduct, document retention. These are things that your board members should be signing on an annual basis. And this just makes sure that everybody knows what's expected of them as a board member as far as what types of behavior aren't tolerated and what repercussions could come if a board member is in violation of a policy. And then you've got your insurance. So you need to have both general liability for protecting your organization during events or any infrastructure your organization might own, whether it's like a banner on the street or some signage along the commercial corridor. But it's also super important to have directors and officers insurance. So a lot of organizations don't carry this because it's super expensive, but it's something that's going to be protecting your board members and their assets. So Joy, I wanted to just pause for a moment. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about the importance of directors and officers insurance, if you could?
Sure. It is really important that everybody carries directors and officers insurance. It is, it's an expense, but if you don't have this insurance and something happens, you then personally can be sued as well as your business can be sued. So it is something you definitely want to have. You want to keep track of it. Like, when's my directors and officers insurance due? Those things that we do, those activations on the streets. So if you have a street fair, or if you're putting up banners, or if you have somebody wandering the street collecting signatures, those people, let's say they slip and fall and you don't have coverage and they decide to sue. If you don't have directors and officers, they can come to you personally and they can come to your business and sue. So I cannot stress the importance enough of directors and officers. So, when you're planning something, let's say you're going to do a street cleanup on your street, check. Before you let people go out and do that, check your insurance to make sure that it is current. And if it is not, cancel the event until that insurance is updated. I cannot tell you how important it is. It's like, you do not want to be sued personally and you do not want to lose your business. And that can happen. And I also wanted to make a note here about the minutes. So the minutes really are important on so many levels so that people that miss a meeting can know what's happened, so you don't have to regurgitate that information during the next meeting that you have, so they can read the minutes. But it's also really important when you do have changeovers. So, let's say your board president's term is up and you elect a new person. That needs to be reflected in the minutes, because your bank, when you go to the bank and say, we have a new person that's going to be a signer, they're going to want to see the minutes that reflect that vote. So you always want to keep your minutes up to date, because it will come up where you need to show those to outsiders, like your bank. So those are very important. And I would say with the agenda, that one is also important, because we have to remember this isn't a club. These aren't friend groups. You may love the people that you work with, but it's a board meeting. So you want to stay on task, stay on track, be respectful of people's time. And so that's where your agenda comes in handy. If your meeting is 60 minutes or 90 minutes, that's the obligation, and that is in your agenda. So if people want to go long, that's not a part of it. If they want to stay and hang out, that's fine. But that is why your agenda is so important, and to put in, if it's from 10 to noon, you want to say from 10 to 10:30, we're doing introductions or whatever it is, and stick to that agenda. Anyway, thanks, Jacob.
Can I add one more thing? Can I add one more thing to that bucket regarding policies and code of conduct?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think especially in this day and age where, we're a little bit more politically charged, having something that you can refer back to if you're feeling like there's a board member who represents the organization, but maybe isn't carrying themselves in a way that you feel is okay or appropriate. Having some recourse that's included in the language in your bylaws, for example, is really important, because you know, inevitably someone's going to say something that comes across a certain way, and, you know, an organization has an opportunity to condone that or not, you know, and having something in writing to back you up is really important.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, it keeps it from feeling personal, right? If someone is saying something or behaving in a certain way, and, you know, the president has to, you know, address it, or the executive committee has to address it, you know, being able to point to that policy and say, you know, you're in violation of the policy versus we don't like the way you're acting. I think that's a much better way to handle it, and people don't take it as personally. And another note with the directors and officers insurance, I feel like it helps to recruit and retain new board members, because I think a lot of people are hesitant to join a board unless they feel protected, right? They're volunteers. You know, if they're going to be putting themselves on the line, they want to make sure that, you know, their personal assets, their business, their home, whatever it might be, isn't going to be jeopardized by the service that they're doing to the organization. So. Thank you both for that. Let's jump back into it. Here we go. Moving on to our next, there we go. Our next bucket is membership. So for those of you that attended our last webinar, we covered a lot of the basics around membership campaigns and why membership is important. But membership also ties back into your governance and your bylaws. Your bylaws will determine who is eligible for membership. So is it only the businesses within the boundaries that you served? Do they have to pay dues? All that stuff is determined in your bylaws. You should also be tracking your membership. So if you don't have a membership tracking system in place, this would be a great project to work on in the coming year. This is a way to kind of keep track of who owes dues, who's paid dues, who gets benefits, who has lapsed and shouldn't be, you know, listed on the website or shouldn't be invited to participate in whatever event you're doing. It's just a way for you to keep track of who's going to get benefits, but also how much revenue you're bringing in. You know, your membership is your primary source of revenue for most business districts. So being able to track that will let you kind of determine what you're able to do for the rest of the year. And then what do members get? So this is determined by a work plan. So your organization should have a work plan that is updated and approved each year by the board. And this is essentially all the things that you want to do throughout the whole year. And that work plan will kind of determine all the benefits that members get. It also will inform your budget, and if you have staff, what their priorities are. So having a work plan is incredibly important. We have templates available if your organization doesn't have a work plan, but this should definitely be you know, one of the first things, or actually it should happen before the year even starts, one of the last things that you do as you prepare for the new year. Speaking of your budget and your finances, your annual budget is something that needs to be approved annually by the board. And you should also review it at the mid-year to make sure that you're on track and you have the funds to actually do what you want to do. This is informed by your work plan. So basically, you determine, you know, what benefits do you want to provide to your member businesses, and then how much it's going to cost. That goes into your budget. And then that will help you determine, okay, how much do we want to charge for dues so that we can actually generate the revenue that we need to do to, you know, complete the things in our work plan. Financial controls are also super important for your district. So this will determine who has the authority to sign checks, who has the authority to cash checks, and who opens the mail. There should be a separation of duties, so you always have two sets of eyes on the books. Are credit cards something that you can use as an organization? So it kind of determines all the different aspects around finances. So it's not just the president or not just the treasurer handling that, but there's a specific person that's designated to do all those things. So this actually also reminds me of another story that I think Jeff wanted to share. Do you want to talk a little bit about the importance of having designated check signers?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Cody sort of touched a little bit on this earlier during the introductions, just, how burdensome it can be tracking down old account holders and that kind of thing. And, some of that stuff can be, sussed out online, a little bit of emailing back and forth and sleuthing that way. But, when it comes to bank documents and who's legally allowed to sign checks and that kind of stuff, it gets a little bit more tricky. And I was involved with an organization that had to, it was a small organization that grew, and for so many years, there were one or two people that were involved with pretty much everything. And as such, stayed on the bank documents for years, even beyond when they moved on, and not having these sort of checks in place that you sort of refer back to every year, missing that can really create a lot of work down the road. And one place this came into play was with their bank accounts. And it required a huge gathering of people to come meet in person at the bank, which took time to get everybody's schedules coordinated. But, you had to have people there to sign over because they were the only ones on the document before. And so I couldn't just go in, for example, if I were the new president, and say, hey, I'm the new person, sign me up. You had to get authorization from a previous signer. And so it creates a lot of work. And especially if you want to have more than one person involved, that's that many more people that you have to bring and meet in person at the bank. And so it was a headache and it was a learning lesson. But again, it sort of drives home that point that, look at these things once a year. It's dry, it's boring, it's daunting, but it'll save you a lot of work down the road. I think, in the bylaws, some board members, they can only serve for 2 years in a position, so at most don't let that much time go by, but really it should be something that you refer back to on a yearly basis at least.
Yeah, Venture Portland recently went through that process of changing our check signers, and I think it's a good thing that the bank is so, strict with the way that they do the process and all the things that they require to make it official. But it was not an easy process. It was a long, drawn-out process that did require. It was a good thing we do have such good record keeping, because it did require us producing minutes and getting signatures from officers, and not just digital signatures, wet signatures, which is even more fun during COVID. So yeah, something to keep in mind. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So plan ahead there if you are having a leadership transition. Okay, just a couple more things around the annual checkup, and then we'll talk a little bit about bylaws. So the last piece with your finances you want to keep in mind is financial reports. So is your treasurer providing financial reports at each and every board meeting? So this should be the statement of financial position, the statement of financial activities. The treasurer should prepare these, and the board should review them on a monthly basis to make sure that the organization is on track. You should also keep these financial reports in your corporate documents as well. Okay, so these next two may be applicable, they may not be. The first one is personnel. So if your district has staff, you will have employee contracts, and these contracts also need to be reviewed on an annual basis by the board and signed by the employee. It should include everything from their title, their hours, their salary information, but also their scope of work. What's their job description? Make sure that all that is reviewed annually as the organization's needs change and the priorities change as well. Employees should also have a performance review. So the work plan that we discussed that helps inform all the other things that the organization is doing is also your employees' marching orders. So that will provide them with their priorities, but they should also have a single point of contact that they meet with regularly to discuss these priorities. Be there to support them, make sure that they're on track, and then to kind of help them understand if the priorities are changing. A lot of people didn't put in their work plans that COVID was going to hit. So being able to meet with your employee regularly will ensure that you're actually being effective and that your employee is spending their time doing what the organization feels is most important. You should also do an annual performance review and then discuss any changes to paid time off or salary during that time. You should also save these performance reviews. I think Venture Portland saves them for 7 years, just in case there's any issues that come up down the line with an employee that files a claim. You'll have that documentation ready to be provided. And finally, you should be reimbursing your employees. So they're traveling all over the city, all over your district. They're using their personal cell phones. Make sure that they're getting reimbursed for their mileage and any expenses that they're incurring as they're working for the organization.
Hey, Jacob, can I make a note about reimbursement real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So and Nancy probably remembers this, when I was with 82nd, they actually built into their work plan a small section that aligned with their budget, basically to encourage some support of businesses in the district. So as an organizer, when I was going around business to business doing outreach, sometimes that looks nicer when I actually spend a little bit of money when I walk into those places. And so they built it into their work plan for me specifically to grab a cup of coffee or a bite to eat, to throw some money their way, show support. And instead of it being sort of like an informal thing where I just fill out this reimbursement every once in a while, I was actually, is baked into their work plan. And so that was a budget that they could, or an expense that they could budget for and expect.
That's a great idea. I think being present in the district is one thing, but actually putting the association's money in investing into its members, I think is also really powerful. So I love that idea, and I think other districts should follow suit. And then finally, the last piece here is office space. Not many districts have this, especially now that we're all working from home. But if you do have an office space, you should be reviewing the lease agreement, or the board should be reviewing the lease agreement annually. You should be keeping all the receipts for all your depreciable items, whether it be electronics, furniture, anything that goes into that space. And then document storage. So a Google Drive with limited access is recommended, but you also may keep hard copies in a secure centralized location. An important thing to keep in mind with a Google Drive is make sure that access is limited, but not so limited that if one person goes away, you completely lose everything. So you want to have multiple eyes on that just to make sure that you retain access with turnover. Okay, so you probably are all sick of hearing me talk. So I'm going to kick it over to our fearless leader, Joy, to discuss some of the more important aspects of why you should be reviewing your bylaws on an annual basis. So Joy, why don't you tell us a little bit about bylaws?
Thanks, Jacob. I know this is a very dry webinar. Thanks everybody for sticking it out. It's kind of be daunting. It's a lot to undertake, but it is really necessary. So that's why we do this training every year. But I realize it's like not the most exciting thing. I will say maybe it's more exciting thinking about, we're doing a Jeopardy game twice a year now that relates back to attending these webinars. So you can win prizes and fun things. So thanks for, maybe taking some notes so that you can potentially win. I think our first Jeopardy game will be in June and then another one in December. So, and it all will relate back to these trainings. So anyway, maybe a little incentive to stay awake. So with bylaws, bylaws are essential to the working of any nonprofit, and they are really your guideposts for how things get done. One of the pieces with bylaws that can be difficult is if you write your bylaws and make them so rigid, you are then really held hostage by them. And that can be very challenging, especially, let's think about the pandemic, right? So many of our bylaws, right, do we have that Does it say that your board meetings can be held virtually? If not, you want to change that to get that language in there, right? And, you know, let's say with the pandemic, you need to do a vote. Let's say somebody resigns and you need to vote in a new officer. Can you do that electronically? Is that allowed by email? Those are things you want to consider with your bylaws, especially in the time of emergency situations like the ongoing pandemic. So again, once you write the bylaws, that is your guide. So writing it, the bylaws, to give you the flexibility that you need is really important. I would say particularly with the pandemic, this is another example where a lot of bylaws mean well, but they'll say, our board meeting is from 10 to 11:30 on the first Monday of every month. And then you're beholden to that. Well, with COVID life, small business owners are in trauma and crisis. They are pivoting their businesses constantly. And so what happens if you have that rigid language? That means that you have board members who leave you because they say, guess what? I had to take another job. My schedule is totally different. I can't do Mondays at 10 a.m. anymore. Bye. And they leave you, right? So you can unintentionally lose great people by having rigidity in your bylaws. Now, the same case can be made for some groups that say, I want to know that we're meeting on the first Monday of every month at 10, and that works great. And I think in normal life, that's fine. But in pandemic life, taking a look at making it a little more flexible. You know, I'm on one board that we used to do the third Thursday of every month. Well, these are food and beverage people. That is out the window. So our commitment now is every month after our board meeting, we do a doodle poll for the next month and make the decision. So it's much more fluid and flexible than it ever was. And that's because we lost really good people who could not attend during these rigid timeframes. So again, just notes on, you know, real life bylaw issues, right? You want this to be the thing that you can refer to, but also you don't want to lose people, lose momentum because you've been too rigid. Committees is another one. So, you know, again, ideally you have a really robust board with several members and you can have multiple committees. I think a lot of us are experiencing a huge shift. You know, a committee of one's not a committee. A committee of two is not really a committee either. So if at this point your board is small enough and you can work together on issues versus siphoning and siloing off people, I would suggest that you hold off on committees. Rewrite the language in your bylaws to say, if and when we form committees, then these are the requirements, right? So you could still use some of that old language that the committees meet every month, they take on certain tasks, they report back to the board. But again, if and when you have committees. I think several associations feel strangled by their bylaws around committees right now. They've lost a lot of members. And it's like, well, but our bylaws say we have to have a finance committee and a nominating committee and an events committee and a marketing committee. And they're like, right? Like, remove that language so you can do the work together until life changes again and you can get more people on your board. Another question that comes up a lot is around quorum. What the heck is quorum, right? So it's like, is it 51% of people attending? So when you look at Robert's rules, that states that the minimum number for quorum is the minimum number of your voting members. So you can determine what that percentage is like. And again, I highly recommend that you put that in as a percentage versus a number, because as your board expands and contracts, you want to be able to have quorum. So my recommendation for quorum is, let's say that you have a board of 10 people, that your quorum is, of the 10, it's 6 people. So it's 51% of your people to have quorum, right? So with this, when you have a board meeting, let's say you've got 10 people on your board and only 4 show up, you need to cancel the meeting. You don't have quorum to hold the meeting, right? Governance cannot happen. Voting cannot happen. You cannot conduct business without quorum. So that's just some language that people get really tricked out about. Like, should it be 2/3, 1/3? I say that you want a half plus 1 so you can actually vote and conduct business. But don't get yourself totally tripped up on the word quorum. Remove it if it confuses everyone. Take it out, use a different word. Say, more than half the people have to show up. Whatever makes the most sense to the mindset of the people that you work with, that you have on your board. And then also I noticed in a lot of bylaws, it still says where your meetings are going to take place. Well, they're virtual, but our bylaws don't say virtual, right? So that's something that we want to button up. We've got the same thing with Venture. We're doing virtual meetings, of course, and that will continue, but we don't actually have that language in our bylaws right now. So, we all have work to do. And then term limits. So this is one that comes up so often about what are proper term limits. And the truth of things is that being on a board, getting acquainted easily takes a year. So if suddenly you say that your board term is 1 year, by the time the person gets up to speed, they're gone, right? So then somebody's constantly training somebody else about how to be a good board member. So 1 to 3 years, 2 to 3 is better. Some bylaws do not have any term limits at all. I think that's a mistake. You want people to build community and engage with new faces, bring on new energy. So adding in term limits, whatever that is for your group, if that's, hey, you can serve 2 term limits consecutively of 3 years each, so it's a total of 6 years, and then that person needs to step away for a year, and then they can be revoted in, that's really solid. But to have people on for decades, it can be, it's a lost opportunity to bring in new faces from your group. So that's something to think about, and I think we often miss that because we're so excited when somebody says they'll become a board member. You just want to keep them forever. But it's a missed opportunity because then you can't engage with other people because that board member is holding a seat. So those are just some brief mentions, particularly with COVID, that have really come to mind for many boards that I'm on and for Venture Portland. And I'm sure that we're all encountering many of these same issues. Do people have any questions for me right now about bylaws?
I have a comment more, and it's something that I need to address here at Alberta Main Street, and I'm not talking about you, Elise, by the way. But look at your bylaws to say where people should be located or for how long, because in this day and age, people are working remotely, they're traveling. I've got a couple board members, they're lovely, but one doesn't even live in Portland anymore, and another one is doing a job in a training camp for baseball for 4 months in Arizona. And I don't know how that serves our organization. I feel like there's a disconnect, but there's nothing in our bylaws that say otherwise. So that's something that I didn't notice in the checklist or in your discussion, but it's something that I would say, look at that too, like the connection with the community and street. We are place-based orgs. We need people that are really able to walk the street and be active and hear, not, oh, I'm in Arizona, I'll be back, or, I read the newspaper, I know what's going on. So that's just an issue I wanted to bring up that I'm facing personally.
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. That's an excellent point. And, Liz, you mentioned at the top of the meeting today, like, okay, so let's say you've got a big corporation that wants to join your board. Is that allowed? How do you handle that? That's a good time. This is a good piece to put into your bylaws to say, well, who can join? And if you're unsure, how does your board handle that? So you can leave it, you could rewrite your bylaws to be vague enough to say, if you don't meet the existing parameters of A, B, and C, your association, your membership will be considered on a case-by-case basis. And then that way you're covered. So if Amazon comes to you and says, we want to be on your board, you can say, hold on a minute, you don't necessarily meet the requirements, we'll get back to you. So that's, one workaround there. Anybody else have questions about bylaws? I might not have answers, but we can find them. Peter.
Is there any consistency or basic information on once some adjustments to the bylaws are made, how those are approved or become formalized? Is that just individual to each organization, or any information on that?
Yeah, Peter, that's an excellent point. So when looking at your bylaws, if you don't have any mechanism listed in it already about how you make changes, how do you amend bylaws, add the language in it and get everybody to vote on it so that you can make these changes without it having to be a huge rigmarole, right? So having something in your bylaws that says how you amend them is very wise and necessary, particularly the things we're talking about with COVID. You know, you don't want to have special sessions to add Zoom meetings into your bylaws. You want to be able to say, we need to make this change. We need to make this amendment to our bylaws. Can we approve that electronically? Does that sort of answer your question, Peter? Great. Elise.
Hi, I sent you a chat message, but if the bylaws call for 7 to 15 members, for example, and we only have 6 members on the board, are we in trouble with the state, or we're just in violation of our own bylaws?
Yeah, you're in violation of your own bylaws at that point. So it's recruit, recruit, recruit. And then work to change it for the future, right? So especially, you know, as I mentioned with COVID times, right? So a lot of boards are smaller because business owners have disappeared, or they're traumatized, or they're busy, or you've decided that you need your dream team of board members. So you don't want 50 people on your board. But, you know, to make the change right now would be it'd be an ethical line there to say, oh, we're going to change it right now because we don't meet the requirement. So I would suggest that you if you've got 7 to 15 and you only have 6, but 7 are listed, recruit a 7th right now so that you can then ethically make the amendment to the bylaws.
I don't mean to get you into our family of board and stuff, but I'm actually recommending we not get board members right now because we're going through a big program evaluation with National and Oregon Main Street, who has told us to hold off because we might be changing our structure, right? Or at least being presented with recommendations. So to bring on new board members in that right now might mean that, you know what I mean, a disconnect. But you know, I have to honor that what you say for other districts, but it might not be the case for ours right now.
Yeah,
Elise may disagree with me, and we'll have that discussion offline. But
I think you're safe.
Hold off, Elise. Don't recruit right today.
I think your secret's safe with us. I don't think anybody's going to call the Secretary of State and ask to look into it.
I mean, that's the question. Is it a state issue, or is it just an internal issue?
You know, that's a very good question. It could become a state issue. The state's not checking everybody's bylaws, but if they are notified of an issue, then it becomes an issue. You know, so it's one of those, you want to be careful about it. Right? Don't tell anybody. Yeah, your secret's safe.
Elise, we'll have a conversation offline. We want to make sure we're not at legal risk.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else have questions or comments about bylaws right now? All right, thanks, Jacob. Oh, Lizzie, sorry.
I know I'm such a chatty Kathy. I'm sorry. I want to talk about alternatives to Robert's Rules of Order, because when I talk to certain funders or I talk to different people, they're like, "You're still using Robert's Rules of Order?" Well, like Portland Public Schools doesn't even use it, and unless it's a city council meeting, they don't use it. So is anybody using alternatives, or do you recommend any alternatives, or do you say no, stick with Robert's because it's tried and true?
I mean, for me, I don't really pay attention to Robert's rules that much, other than things like, okay, what's the definition of quorum that makes sense for nonprofits? That's when I look to that kind of information. But otherwise, things, I think that, nonprofits have evolved a lot in the last decade or two. So this very formal suit and tie kind of thing where everything is very rigid, and that's how I think of the Robert's rules. I like to think of them that they're useful to you when you need them, but again, don't be strangled by them. But in terms of looking at a whole other methodology, does anybody have recommendations?
May I speak?
Nancy's got.
Robert's Rules has been rewritten 3 times in the last 6 years. They are extremely up to date now. There's actually rules for small organizations that are things like you don't have to make a motion to accept your bylaws. You can just, present them, and president can now make a motion in a small board. I mean, you don't have to write down who the second is on a motion, only who made the motion and that it was seconded and passed. So they have really simplified Robert's rules. So if you are uncomfortable with what you read in volume 9 or volume 10, you need to get the most recent Robert's rules, and you will not have this attitude that it's only people in suits and that it isn't working for small groups that want to have organized and good meetings. Okay, just as a parliamentarian. It's not what it used to be. It is definitely up to date and paying attention to the small groups and the kind of organizations that we are all involved in.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to say that I was involved with another organization a few years back, and we tried to use consensus, and it was impossible because there are so many different variations of consensus, and we spent weeks and weeks and weeks on trying to define that. So if anybody's using consensus successfully, I'd love to know about it, but if you're thinking about it, I would say beware.
Yeah, Elise, that's an excellent point. I think that, one of the pieces with the kinds of work that we're all trying to do, governance is meant to be a useful tool, but it is not the work of the organization, right? You're trying to do other things, build membership, do street fairs, this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to get trapped in every meeting only ends up focusing on governance or trying to get consensus, then becomes this big time suck. When you're like, well, we need to be talking about our next event or our next membership campaign, that kind of thing, right? And so they can just eat up all your meetings if you do consensus only.
Yep.
Yeah, good point. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, I put in the chat that when I first joined, like the first nonprofit I joined, and suddenly I had an officer position, and suddenly I was the president, and I had to do Robert's rules years ago. I'm like, huh? What is this motion thing? Like, there's no training. I read that. It was so hard, and I fumbled through it. And I see so many new presidents fumble through the Robert's rules at the meetings. They're like, was that what I was supposed to do? Am I making a motion or am I moving? It's just really hard. It would be, I don't know if it exists, but I think it would be useful for people if they choose to use the new Robert's rules, if there was some kind of like video training or something. I don't know if it exists, but if anybody knows of it and you could share with us, that would be great. Because I'm thinking of the next person after me, it's going to be another business owner who's going to be probably not, well schooled in Robert's rules.
Right. That's a
One
good
of our
point.
conferences, we actually had a presentation on the most simplest things to do, and it was like 4 or 5 pages that people could, it was quite simplified.
That book looks daunting to me. I just want to know how to run the meeting. I want like the 5 things I need to do to run a meeting. But no, I appreciate that. Yeah.
In the book, the Robert's Rules book, there's a sort of a cheat sheet in the very beginning of it on how to make motions and all that stuff. And so it explains a lot in a very small footprint here. So you might want to, I don't know if you can see.
And is that updated every year, or does that part not change?
Yeah, if this is the 75th, I don't know what edition they're on now. I got this a few years ago, but there is a cheat sheet in there. So it's a table called the Table of Rules, and it's really quick glance.
I'll check it out. I'm hoping it's online also.
Okay. Yeah, it should be by now.
Yeah, so that Deborah was saying that could be a good staffer lunch or president's council meeting conversation for sure. I see a lot of new presidents in the same position I was years ago being like, what was I supposed to do? Right. I think it's a good system when you use it. I like it.
Well, the best thing is to have a parliamentarian on your board, Nancy. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Good point, Roger. All right, so let's move along, Jacob. I know we're getting, it's already 1:13. Thanks everybody for sticking around.
Yeah, time flies when you're talking bylaws. So thanks, Joy. That was a great overview, highlighting some of the really important stuff to be considering. So now that you've all had a chance to kind of think about and marinate on what some of the things you want to focus on over the next year, I want to remind you, you can't do it alone. So this is going to take the work of the entire board. So we're going to do a quick activity where I'll put you into a couple of breakout rooms, and I want you to talk with your group about how you plan on working with your board to complete the annual checkup and the things that you've identified that you need to do by the end of the year. So we're going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll meet right back here and go. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good discussion. Let's go around the room and just discuss some of the key things that came out of those quick chats. So let's go ahead and start with Lizzie. Oh, not busy, Lizzie.
Oh, that
Lizzie Caston.
it's okay. I'm gonna defer to Elise because I took up too much time in that session. So I'm gonna let Elise go.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Lizzie. You know, we realized that Main Street is different than the business districts. So the things that we have to take care of are a little bit different. And I think Roger was in our group and had some something to say about membership on Venture Portland. So I don't know if you want to take that over, Roger, or not, but we realized that what we do is a little bit different because we're a 501c3 and not a C6. So. And,
wow, I didn't realize you were C3. That's pretty valuable to any of us. And I know that Venture Portland has been trying to get Venture Portland to be a 501c3 for probably 5 years or more. I don't know, long time. It hasn't been successful yet, so we're still a 501c6. But my comment about board delicacy was I was hoping that since Alberta is a new member to Venture Portland, that they would be able to exercise their ability to have a delegate to the board of directors, rather than have to wait to the annual meeting being the only time of year that they could possibly be able to nominate a director to the board of directors. That's a structural limitation to the bylaws of Venture Portland, not to the limitation of Alberta Main Street. And I really thank you for being here, Lizzie and Elise. It's good.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, it's a great point. Taking advantage of the benefits that come along with membership is super important and something we hadn't yet touched on. So thanks for bringing that up. Let's move now to Deborah's group. Deborah, are you there?
Sure, I'll talk.
Hey.
We talked a lot about going over those Robert's Rules of Order and just kind of maybe being able to present that a little bit or do it at like a president's council or something so that people can kind of get refreshed on it. And then I also talked a little bit about how Williams District, we're actually going into a board retreat at the beginning of March. So this will all be really great for us to be able to go over together as a board, but also to take a look at our bylaws, kind of what Roger was saying. If you have, an empty position or you have people leaving, we're in such flux, how are your bylaws written? Can the board bring on new people in the middle of the year, or do you have to wait until that annual meeting? Are your bylaws structured in a way that will allow for that fluidity, especially in times like right now where we have business owners who a year ago could volunteer their time, and now they're deep in the trenches of trying to keep their business alive. So they may not be able to volunteer that time anymore. But we may have other business owners who are brand new to the area, who are just opening their business, who want to be on the board and connected and want to be, in the middle of it. So, just really that's a part I'm going to look at in their bylaws to really go over with them and see if we need to change that to allow for the organization to still be, vibrant and thriving while these changes are happening in our economic environment.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah. And then finally, we will go to Kathy's group. Kathy, do you want to tell us a little bit about what came up in your chat?
Sure. We talked about insurance, pretty exciting stuff. Just the cost of that. People were surprised by the cost of that, directors and officers insurance. But we found out maybe that instead of $400 a month, you could just pay. There's like one that's an annual fee of $750 a year. That might be a little more affordable. I'm not quite sure what the difference is, but maybe for a smaller organization. And also just talked about a better filing system of getting all your documents on a Google Drive so that everyone can access them and you're not calling people going, where'd you put this? And where do I find this? And who signed this? And so anyway, just being more organized on all the paperwork, putting it all in one place with files and names and good organization.
Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of districts don't even realize that you probably have a couple of insurance brokers in your district, and they are probably the ones that are most likely willing to give you the best deals. So if you haven't reached out to them, see if they can put together a policy for you, and you might even get a new member out of it. So great ideas. Okay, so we've got about 3 minutes left, and I just wanted to open it up for any last questions that the group might have. So, hey, Deborah.
Yeah, in talking about policies, something that has started to come up, especially because of the district of where Williams lies, we're beginning to talk about things like purchasing policy, like where the board is spending their money. And do we create a formal policy around, the fact that if the board needs something, if the organization needs something, we look in district first, we look at BIPOC businesses first kind of thing, and then go out of district if we can't find it within type of situation. So I was wondering if anybody else has that type of purchasing policy in their policies, or how common that might be for the different districts.
That would be in your policy manual, not in your bylaws, of course, right?
Yeah, that's what I said. Just like you have your anti-harassment policies, you have these other policies not within the bylaws, but things that the board have agreed to uphold. But this is when we are looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion within the city and within business. As far as Williams goes, we have started talking about, do we have a purchasing policy so that our dollars are staying in the district and we're going back to members and things, so that we can tell our members this. We can say, we're looking at BIPOC businesses owners to go, with first. We're looking in district. We want to support and keep our dollars in the district versus sending them out to, somebody that works in Southeast because they're, they know somebody on the board. And so that business has, can help us out or bid the lowest, but they're not in the district. So, when you're getting bids, do you go, a policy that says we go to businesses in our district first, and then, do we go out, further? What kind of, intention does the board have with that kind of thing?
Sounds good.
That's a great question. And this came up at our Equity and Outreach Committee that met last week. So Venture Portland participates in the Portland Means Progress program, and part of that is about intentional purchasing with BIPOC-owned businesses, but Venture Portland hadn't adopted a formal policy on that. So one of the things that committee is going to be doing is putting together a policy to make it official. So once we pull that together, we'll make sure to share that with you all. In the meantime, it's a great tie into the contest we're currently running on Instagram about intentional purchasing. We purchased some gift certificates from some Black-owned businesses, and we're going to be doing a giveaway on Monday the 1st in celebration of the Black History Month. So check us out on Instagram if you haven't already. Follow us on Instagram and tag a friend to be entered to win that. But more information coming around intentional purchasing, because I think that's super important. All right, well, we are at time. So I want to thank you all for being here. I will follow up via email probably tomorrow with some more resources, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Let's keep the conversation going. And if there's anything we can do to help you complete your annual checkup, please let us know. And have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. It's a
Thanks, Jacob.
great discussion. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.